we are not embracing our greatest qualities collectively. And if you ever Google Rick DellaRatta famous quote, you'll see something I said only days after 9/11 when I was interviewed after I had read the Jazz for Peace poem at a jazz festival. And they wanted to hear that poem. And in the conversation, not even part of the poem that you heard, but in the conversation, I just happened to say, if we were to embrace our greatest qualities, such as creativity and artistry and humanity and intellectuality, etc., we would have a better chance at avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction.
Welcome to the Mindful Hustle, where we decode the mindset behind momentum. I'm Donnie. If you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but not seeing the right results, this show will help you shift that at the root. Here's something wild. Psychologists have found that our belief systems are formed by age 7, and most people never update them. So your business and your life could be running on outdated inner code. At Reality Realization Institute, we help you rewrite that internal script to reflect who you truly are today, not who you were told to be. Remember, you can book a free call at realityrealization.org/call. Now, let's hop into today's podcast. Today's guest is Rick DellaRatta, long regarded as one of the world's finest jazz pianists. He gained major recognition as a composer when his symphonic piece Permutata was recorded by the London Symphony Orchestra at Abbey Road Studios in 1999, and as a vocalist when he was listed among the greatest jazz singers of all time in Scott Yano's book Jazz Singers. Through his global work with the Jazz for Peace World Tour, Rick has dedicated his life to using music as a force for peace, understanding, and human potential. Recognized alongside legends like Bono, Elton John, and Sting as a top musician philanthropist, Rick continues to inspire through innovation, artistry, and heart. Let's dive into a conversation with a true visionary. Thank you for hopping on the show, Rick. Glad to have you here.
It's a pleasure, Donnie. Thanks for having me today.
Now, let's start here. I'm curious to know a bit more about your background, about what really got you into this space, and what were some of the moments you experienced along your journey that really shined for you? So, if you could just tell us a little bit, how did you really get your start?
Well, my start in music, period, or my start in music using it as a global mission to heal the world and solve our world's problems. There's kind of two halves to me. Yeah. So there's like my life leading up to 9/11, where I was just a musician, and
Mm,
then my life from the moment I wrote a poem on 9/11, and that's when I started to incorporate my beliefs as a human being into my music.
mm.
So what's your preference? You want me to start right at 9/11 or go back further?
Let's go back further. Let's start from the very beginning.
Okay, well, you want to start at the very beginning. Really, I started playing music and improvising as a 6-year-old child because piano had shown up in the living room of my house on Christmas Eve. And I figured that must have been brought by Santa Claus, and I should figure it out on my own. So I was trying to figure it out on my own, and that led me to improvising on my own. And I kind of saw a value in just exploring music without any preconceived notions. So that started me on a special journey. And then I started to I was, put in piano lessons, and one thing led to another in relation to studying music. So I had two things going on at the same time. I had music studies, and then I had my own music study. And then all of that led to, society's interest in me as a musician, where I became a church organist filling in for my mother. I became a keyboard player in a, rock band of my homeroom teacher's sons. I became played in a grown-up band that played at parties and stuff, and just onward, all kinds of wild scenarios.
Hmm. That's amazing to hear. And did you always have the sense that music was going to be sort of like your passion, your purpose, how you would really find your meaning and direction in life?
Well, it's something that I could look at with, what I felt was something that aligned with what I wanted to do in life, which was make people happy. It looked to me like there was a bunch of people happy, and they were happy partially because the musicians were playing music that they liked, and that was making them happy. So I thought maybe I could be one of those guys. That could be a way forward for me. Maybe I could use my musical talents and skills towards that goal of reaching people with my music. So that looked like an interesting, viable path in life. It's a very complicated one. The arts are kind of crazy, and there isn't really a proper way forward that I know of, but it did lead me on a pretty wild journey that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Love that. And along this journey, you did mention that there is really two phases of your life, the pre 9/11 and the post 9/11, when a lot more meaning and mission was added to this music journey. But I'm curious, prior to that moment, did you have any inklings that you would be kind of sent along that journey, or was it really just a radical shift for you?
I was growing as a human being from being a musician. So I was realizing a lot of things. I realized that music could stimulate your intellect. I realized that there was artistic merit, and there was, spiritual possibilities in music above and beyond what society was using it for, which was mainly entertainment value and to sell products and accompany film scenes and just basic things. So I mean, I was attracted to both of these things, but I did notice that music that brought a lot more to the table than our capitalistic society was, embracing. And I did see that it could play a very big role in solving our world's problems before 9/11 happened. So it was very strange. I mean, I felt like I was the most prepared human being on this earth for what I was witnessing when I saw the events of 9/11
Mm,
firsthand.
wow, that's powerful. After 9/11 occurred and this took a more powerful shift, tell me about that journey. What about this experience motivated you to move in this new direction?
Well, basically, I had the words of a poem that I had written because I was watching the events unfold from a rooftop less than a quarter of a mile away
Mhm.
down in New York City. I still live in New York City, but right now I'm closer to Times Square. Back then, I was closer to the Lower East Side, and I was less than a quarter of a mile away from the World Trade Center. So I saw everything happen right from my roof of a 5-floor walk up where I lived on the fifth floor. I had a bunch of words on a piece of paper, and I decided to just, after reading those words, to call the whole thing Jazz for Peace. And it was basically a poem. And I've basically been trying to live up to the words of that poem ever since.
And what were some of the realizations of that poem that you're trying to live up to?
Well, basically, what I do is I usually will recite the words and then I'll improvise underneath it. And then the person could actually hear the words of the poem. But I mean, all of the words in the poem are worth living up to, in my opinion.
Okay, okay. Very curious to dive deeper into that. I'm very interested in how that expression goes about.
Well, I mean, if you want, I could do something where I just kind of recite the poem and then improvise underneath that, and then you could hear the words, and then maybe you could ask me about those words or something like that if you want to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, let's do it.
Here we go. I hear jazz for peace coming through the trees, and in my heart it fills me like a celebration. I see the light, and I want to follow, inspired by the past contributions of those that came before. Inspired by the past contributions of those that came before. And when we speak it, people are inspired by the creativity and artistry that laid the groundwork for us to build on in this universal language that is a gift and the creativity and artistry that stands for peace and love and humanity and intelligence, so we can raise our total conscience and see that the gift of giving is our greatest privilege. I hear jazz for peace.
That was awesome.
Thanks.
Wow. Wow. There is a mixture of a sort of message being spoken by both the words and the keys. It was very intriguing, and I'm curious to dive deeper into certain aspects of what resonated. Um, there was a message you shared about more or less remembering our predecessors and being in tune with that kind of wisdom, with that inspiration from those before us. I was curious to know, how does that integrate and where did that really originate from?
Well, like I was telling you, when I started out with the piano, it was just me as a 6-year-old, and it was just me, myself, and I, and the piano. So that was a very honest journey that was really just me and a higher power and a piano and all, encompassing in the present. But then once I started studying, I started to channel and relate to people from the past, whether they were jazz greats from the past, like a Thelonious Monk or a Oscar Peterson or a Bill Evans, or they were even further back where you had people like Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and all of these people from all these different, centuries. And again, they all contributed to the lineage of music. And so, what you eventually learn is that the best way to be able to put your drop in that big ocean is to make your statement based on your own personal ability of your own personal expression of everything that came up to where you are now. And now you say something new, but you have all of that in your, in other words, you've embraced that ocean and now you can contribute to it.
That's very depthful. Love it. Another thing you mentioned that I was curious of was the statement about the intelligence and its interplay with more or less the raising of consciousness. That's very hits home for me, as that's a lot of what I try to pursue in the work that I want to do. So I'm curious on how that is a part of the mission of what you're doing in your Jazz for Peace work, and what was the essence surrounding that?
Well, right away when I started Jazz for Peace, the manager I had at that time wrote something up about my idea and put in that I wanted to raise people's consciousness to their highest level and help people reach their true potential. And that was fascinating because I hadn't really written that myself, but that was someone's perception of it. The bottom line is we're in a state right now where everyone is talking in different ways about the same thing. And basically, that is, we are not embracing our greatest qualities collectively. And if you ever Google Rick DellaRatta famous quote, you'll see something I said only days after 9/11 when I was interviewed after I had read the Jazz for Peace poem at a jazz festival. And they wanted to hear that poem. And in the conversation, not even part of the poem that you heard, but in the conversation, I just happened to say, if we were to embrace our greatest qualities, such as creativity and artistry and humanity and intellectuality, etc., we would have a better chance at avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction. And right now, everyone seems to have different ideas, but they're all very similar. And that is, we have to operate at a higher consciousness. And the problem is society rewards people at lower levels. So you have people doing really low frequency type of behavior, and that's being rewarded. And so they're paying a penalty by being almost like cast down at that lower level. And other people are reacting at a lower level. But when you raise your frequency to a higher level, where the arts and culture and music takes you, you now can see the absurdity of, let's say, spending literally trillions of dollars on bombs that could go towards helping mankind and humanity and going to the people, and all kinds of other bizarre expenditures that are truly unnecessary at a higher level of consciousness. At a low level of consciousness, everything's necessary because you're almost in a Mad Max situation where, fear and greed are ruling the day. But at a higher level of consciousness, I don't know anyone at a high level of consciousness who wouldn't want the $3 trillion back that Jazz for Peace attempted to save the American taxpayer when we brought Israeli, Palestinian, and American jazz musicians into the United Nations and played that concert in 2002, of which we are now reaching the 25th anniversary of. So
Wow.
my point is, now I'm realizing that the reason I was able to come up with ideas like that was because music was shooting my frequency up into a super high level, something of which you experienced just now when I accompanied music to the poem. I mean, I just made that up. That can never be repeated again. Your podcast has music that can never be repeated. I couldn't repeat it because I won't know what it was till I hear the podcast back. You know what I mean? The point of the matter is that whole activity raises my consciousness way above the norm, which actually is, they call it 3D, and then there's 4D, and then there's 5D. And music at a world-class level, at a high level, actually raises you into 5D. So being shot up to 5D all the time from the age of 6 enabled me to say, hey, wait a minute, there is a better way forward if we could all participate somehow. And that's the challenge, getting people to, commit to raising their conscious level, because everyone has the ability to do it.
And definitely. And I'm curious in some of your perspectives. What do you feel like? What would it take to achieve the critical mass where everyone has that raised consciousness and it leads to a different expression of reality for everyone?
Well, it's so easy. That's what's so sad. I mean, this
Mhm.
is a book that I was actually talking about, but I didn't have the book in my hand. It's called Paving the Path for Peace Through Music. And this has a lot of the information that can get us there. But I mean, if you want it in like just a couple of words, okay, one way to get us there is very simple. Instead of funding war at 100%, and funding peace at 0, which is where we are now. Okay? Right? I mean, does anybody disagree with me? So imagine how crazy that is, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there isn't a single person in this world that isn't smart enough to know better than this, right? We all know this is a bad way to go. But we're funding war at 100, we're funding peace at 0, okay? If you funded war at 0 and you funded peace at 100, forget it, But my point is, we have a web page. It's not even part of the Jazz for Peace. Jazzforpeace.org is our web page, but we have another page that has archived material on it. And I looked at it one time and I was stunned. It's called jazzforpeace.wordpress.com/about. And that web page, jazzforpeace.wordpress.com, then you add a /about. If you ever went on there, you would basically see what we have done at 0. What
Mm.
Jazz for Peace has done at 0, okay? And right there, I can tell you, there's no way war could compete with a world that funded peace at even 1%. If you look at that page, because when you look at the page, you see what we did at 0. Imagine what would happen if we were funded at even 1%. So yeah, that is the solution, to simply change it up backwards. No one at a 5D level of consciousness would want to fund war at 100% and peace at 0. Nobody.
Mhm.
So you've got to be at a very low level of consciousness to have a result like the one we have right now. So obviously our problem is simple. We're at a lower consciousness. We have to raise our level. What's going to do that? Well, first of all, music and the arts is going to do that. But what we're doing is we're marginalizing music, we're marginalizing the arts, and we're actually almost putting an imposter in place of music. It's almost like right now you have real and fake everything. Okay,
Mhm.
almost everything. There's a real version, a fake version, and the easiest example is that fish, the salmon, right? You know what a salmon is, right? It goes on a fantastic journey, and then it spawns at the end of it, and the whole story of it is amazing, and it's so full of nutrients that bears are waiting for them. You know, when they get in Alaska. So that's a salmon. That's a whole story. But there's another salmon that you might see in a supermarket that never swam anywhere, right? It was born in polluted waters of Vietnam in a pen. It was fed food pellets from the Baltic Sea that's so polluted that human beings aren't even allowed to touch a fish in there.
Wow.
And those, yeah, they put those in the pellets, and then they bring them over to Vietnam and they throw them in. So you know what I'm saying? And music, you've had the same problem. Have you heard that guy Ice Cube?
Hmm.
Just ask him because he said it himself. He went on a podcast and I heard him. He said he was signed to a rap label. And I was wondering why rap music was so bad because it started out pretty good with Grandmaster Flash and some people. And it started out okay. And I was like, this thing is taking a dangerous turn. I mean, these rappers are telling people to do stuff that's going to get them arrested and long jail sentences. But then this guy goes on a podcast and he says, all the rap labels own the prisons.
Hmm.
So, how is that going to be real? Their agenda is to promote the violent rap that you come up with, put
Yeah.
anything peaceful on an EP so it goes nowhere, promote the violent ones so that they can fill their jails and get more money to privatize and build more jails. So that's not real music. That's a fake agenda creating fake music. So my point is, the whole thing is an imposter.
Yeah. That makes sense. Wow.
And a lot of things around us are captured entities. So they're
Mm.
captured, you know. How are you going to clean the ocean if the biggest donor of the biggest nonprofit to help our oceans, if their donor is the oil company that they're supposed to stand up against,
Mm.
how would you ever get that ocean clean? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So these are the problems that we're in. Ultimately, we have to raise our conscience. There's a guy named Smedley Butler. He's a
Mm.
general in the army. And if you ever look this guy up, apparently he became a five-star general and he got so well known, he got so famous. And one day he said, enough. This is all fake. It's all bullshit. My whole life is bullshit. My whole life is a lie. And he just turned on the whole thing.
Wow.
And if you look the guy up, you'll read about him. I mean, unfortunately, that's what's going to take because his consciousness was too high for, you know what I mean? The lie that he had to buy into every day and he just couldn't live with himself.
Yeah.
So that is an example of maybe what would have to happen.
I see. I see. People breaking through and saying enough's enough. That makes sense.
I do know that as you go down a certain path, you have to get worse and worse and worse to keep up. You know what I mean? Eventually it becomes hell. I mean, there's some people that they've done interviews of, and they were like, man, I was just so happy when it finally was over, you
Mhm.
know, because it starts out great, but as it continues, you know, more and more sacrifice is made to do something that you ultimately don't believe in.
Yeah.
It's one thing to sacrifice for what you do believe in, but when you're making the same sacrifices and you don't even believe in it, you know, I don't see how that's such a great way to live.
Yeah.
How much
Agree.
money you're making.
There just has to be more cultivation for mankind, more tools, systems put into place to support that type of growth. And I see in the work that I do that there's building communities who are interested in things like manifestation, stuff like that. That's kind of like the an entry level version of developing consciousness and more of a spiritual perspective. So I do see some movement occurring for the younger generation, which is a positive direction to be moving in. So I'm hopeful for the future to come.
Okay. Well, the great thing right now is that there are answers to a lot of things, and Jazz for Peace actually has the answer to a lot of situations, but implementing them is a different story. But there are answers, and who knows, we might be, there are people who believe this could be an age of enlightenment where we overcome some of these issues.
Definitely. Something I was curious about that you had mentioned was that on that WordPress website, there were some stories and examples you're saying of the impacts of jazz for peace on that 0% level. I was just curious if there was any that you could share with us that any listeners curious on diving deeper could kind of get an insight of what they were going to walk into.
Well, there really are. Unfortunately, there's 850 of them, so I wouldn't know
Wow.
which choose. Lots of them in Atlanta, by the way. We've been to Atlanta
Uh,
a bunch of times. There's a girls' school there called Clark University.
yeah.
We've played there. I've done something at Georgia Tech, I believe.
Okay.
Uh, I've done something in a church in Atlanta. There's just been a bunch of stuff in Atlanta, but aren't you also next to Alabama's close, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Alabama. I don't know. We've been all over, but gee, I don't even know. I mean, this shirt was given to me by indigenous tribe
Mm-hmm.
in the north of Kenya called the Maasai, and I was doing something for them to basically try and save the Great Migration. But all of them did the same thing. They followed 3 easy steps, and that basically was, it starts out with a comment, and that comment represents the seedling of a tree, and then the comments of their friends and supporters and board members represents the roots of the tree. The comments of some of those people's friends and friends of those people represent the final outlay of roots. And our motto is help us plant the roots so we can grow your empowerment tree. And
Mm-hmm.
really, the difference between us and other people is that we grow a tree with roots, just like a tree that you see outside. Whereas a lot of people will try to get all these things in place without the roots, and then, they don't really have anything at the end of the day.
That makes sense. And so, something I'm curious of is what is the vision for Jazz for Peace next? Is it to be that center point for when the financials of the world start to shift and we start to decrease from the war-based funding and start putting into more peace organized things? What is the goal for Jazz for Peace right now?
Jazz for Peace provides the way, and only provides the way,
Mm,
for those who have the will. So ultimately, when someone shows up with the will, we provide the way.
hmm.
So we have ideas, like we've already proven that helping outstanding causes could dramatically change our world for the better. So we always have that. We've already proven that bringing music back into the schools is a great thing for kids, and that the art form of jazz can have a profoundly positive effect on a child. We've already proven that our instrument donation program is more beneficial to society, to give people the weapon of a musical instrument, because
Hmm.
that's a weapon of peace.
Yeah.
We've proven a lot of things, but now it's really up to the world, where, do they have the will? I mean, people now interview me about all kinds of. I think there was someone in Atlanta recently who wanted to know about our plans for a trickle up economy for philanthropy that would
Hmm.
balance out all of the problems that our trickle down economy is creating. And,
Yeah.
and we believe that if you had a trickle up economy where outstanding causes could get the funding first instead of last, when they spend that money, the funds trickle up into the economy instead of down from the super wealthy. They trickle up from the outstanding cause, that you could balance out, these problems. But what we really do is we look for the will, and then we provide the way.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a powerful conversation. Thank you for sharing so openly about your story and the mission of Jazz for Peace, sharing a bit of the essence of that when you played for us. That was a magical experience. Something I like to do at the end of these episodes is to ask if you had to give one insight to those out there seeking just a better future, a better reality for them, their family, their children. What would you express to them? What would you share with them that could be just a little nugget of guidance or wisdom that could help them move forward in that mission?
Well, one thing I would say is that there are people that say a quote, my famous quote, keeps getting more resonant each day. And that quote is, when we fill our souls up with our greatest qualities, we will have a better chance at avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction. So I think you can always wake up in the morning and say to yourself, hey, today I want to fill myself up with humanity, with artistry, with intelligence, with integrity, and just fill your soul up with those things and you'll have a better chance. But there's another thing that's perspective, and this is an old story that someone told me. It's like 3,000 years old, maybe from ancient China. And that is the story of who knows what is good and what is bad. So it's a story of an old man and his horse. The horse took off on him. The neighbor came over and said, old man, I'm so sorry. And the old man said, sorry about what? He said, sorry about the bad news. What bad news? That your horse took off. Oh, well, who knows what is good news and what is bad, the guy said to him. So the guy went away, said, okay. Now, 3 days later, the horse came back with 3 other horses. So now instead of 0 horses, he's got 4 horses. So he puts the horses in the stable. The neighbor comes over. Old man, I just want to congratulate you on the great news. What great news? You've got 4 horses now. You had 0 yesterday. You got 4 today. Who knows what is good news and what is bad? So now his son gets on one of the horses. The horse bucks him off, breaks his leg, and is in disastrous health. They don't have medicine in those days, 2,000 years ago. So neighbor comes over, old man, I'm so sorry to hear about your son. It's such a terrible injury. And again, he said, who knows what is good news and what is bad? So now this is the point where the guy's about to give up on the old man. I mean, this son, he needs his son to play camp plow. This is horrible, horrible news. Anyway, he's like, all right, this guy's crazy, but I did what I had to do. I came over to try to console him. He doesn't want to be consoled. Forget about it. 4 days later, the government knocks on the door and says, hi, sorry, but we got to take your son because the war has started and all of the able young bodies need to go off to the front lines of the war, of which they all died. But now he said, well, there's my son. And his son was all messed up with a broken leg from falling off the horse. So my point is, what looked like the worst news of all, his son not being able to help him with the plowing and all that stuff to make it through the fall harvest season, actually saved his life. So my point is, while you're embracing that famous quote, also consider the fact that bad news can be good, good news can be bad. It just depends on you playing a good game of life every day.
Yeah. Wow. That is a very powerful insight and a very powerful story. Thank you for sharing it with us. Very much appreciated. And now, for those of you out there listening, if this episode stirred something in you, if you feel like you're ready to grow from the inside out and create the kind of life and experience that reflects your highest self, just remember, you can book a free discovery call at realityrealization.org/call. Now, before we wrap, Rick, where can listeners connect with you, learn more about your mission, about what you're doing right now?
You can always reach us at info@jazzforpeace.org. So just the regular email address, info@jazzforpeace.org. And of course, jazzforpeace.org is our website. And if you see my name down at the bottom of the screen, rickdellarata.com, you can find out about me. And again, you could just try Rick DellaRatta famous quote and see what comes up from there. But we're all over the place. You can always type in. If you want to get funding from Jazz for Peace, check this out. You can go on YouTube in the search bar, type in Jazz for Peace, easy as ABC. And if you do that, you will be able to get funding from Jazz for Peace.
Wow, that's big. Well, thank you again for Rick DellaRatta sharing such real and thoughtful perspectives about his journey, about the world at large, and what we really need to do as a community, as a global society to move forward and really make something beautiful for all of us. So thank you all for tuning in, and remember, you don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. If you want to change your results, start by becoming the version of you who already has them. This is the Mindful Hustle. Until next time, be bold, be intentional, and keep realizing your reality.